We were meant to walk on water, but we keep getting that sinking feeling. Fear is in the air. It is unmistakable. It's being talked about everywhere we go. It is just beneath those strong feelings of anger that probably are an expression of a deep down fear most of the time. Just underneath those angry statements and gestures and acts is a tremendous amount of fear. Fear arises quickly along with dread these days that things are not getting better. It seems the angels of our better nature are not winning. Fear is in the air. We are glued to the news in the hopes that this madness will end. Discussion and real possibilities of nuclear war are being talked about now like they have not been talked about since many of us were young, when we were just kids, when we grew up next to fallout shelters and saw those yellow-black signs that said, "This is where you go if there's a nuclear war." That monster we thought was dead and buried seems to be once again rearing its horrific head, and it's so ugly. My generation and those older than I grew up proximate to those shelters that were there to protect us from weapons of war. Is it time now for us to clean them up, to sweep them out, to get them ready for the doomsday clock to resume ticking? This saber rattling by all these men who are leaders of the world, it just seems to rattle us to the core. So much we believe in, so much we value, seems to be on the line, or maybe even to be already lost. Fear is in the air. It's swirling around the world of politics. It's swirling around environmental issues. It's swirling around our families. It's swirling around health care and our worries about our health care. And it's swirling around in our personal lives. Fear is in the air. And we keep getting that sinking feeling, that deep down sense that the future of this planet and of our kids, the future is at stake, and it's urgent. When I turned on the news yesterday morning, I heard about that fight in Charlottesville around the Confederate statue there that involved a death even, and many, many injuries. And once again, I woke up with that sinking feeling all over again, that knot in the pit of my stomach. Fear sucks. And fear sucks the fun out of life. And fear makes us want to give up way too soon. Fight, flight, or freeze, they tell us. They tell us those are our automatic responses to fear when it comes up. They tell us those things go back to when we were just animals, really. We will always want to fight, to flight, to flee, or freeze. Freeze. Fear is intensified, and so are those responses when we don't have any control, and it seems like there's absolutely nothing we can do to fix it, to make this better. It's in the hands of somebody else. And sometimes those somebody else's in whose care we are or the world is, we just don't trust them. We don't trust them to have our better interests in mind, the interests of humanity. We can't control it. It's making us think crazy things, irrational thoughts that we hold to like they're creeds, even facts, even information. We think that they're the truth, and they're not sometimes. And anybody else could tell us that, but we can't hear it. We can't hear it because emotions, strong emotions, trump thoughts. And we will never change our mind unless we change our feelings or learn how to handle them better, at least. So fear leads to irrational thoughts, which we fight over the thoughts, but really what we should be talking about is this fear this fear underneath of those thoughts that trump reason. I was talking to somebody driving down the highway the other day, and he was saying that he was thinking about taking his family to Europe this past summer, but because of terrorism in Europe, he chose not to go. He didn't want to risk their lives. And here we are driving down Highway 64 at rush hour, where he was probably, no exaggeration, 1,000 times more likely to die than from a terrorist act in Europe. But we get these thoughts because of these fears, you see, and we're arguing about the wrong thing, and we're missing the connection that's possible. You can't convince people, though. I remain unconvinced when the fears are what's running my thinking. When Peter stepped out of the boat, it was not on his mind to wonder, can I do this? Can I do this? Can I walk on water? He's saying, come. He's saying, come. Can I do this? Was not on his mind. It was just an impulse of love, it was an impulse of trust that made him step out into the sea, the turbulence. And it's that impulse to love that continues to help us to act, to step out of our boats and trust we can walk on water. Peter had reason to be afraid. You and I, looking at it from the outside, he had reason to not step out of that boat. Every reason in the world not to step into that turbulence. And so do we. We have a number of logical reasons for not stepping out when our fears are saying, don't do it. Those fears are legitimate. We have reason to be afraid these days. We have reason to be afraid. We'd be fools to not be afraid. And those fears are not going to be going away soon. And those fears will be the most intense, severe temptation against trust, against being able to trust each other, to trust God, saying, come, come. And yet you and I know there is no future to the world. There's no world that can work without trust. There's no world worth living in unless we continue to trust each other. There's no way around that. I did another wedding yesterday, a wonderful young couple, deep, profound, reflective, more realistic than most, I would say. And I had to see in them, as I watched them sitting there and coming out of the study week that I just did and hearing this gospel that we just proclaimed, I had to want to say to them as they were stepping out on this unknown, turbulent sea that is love, that is marriage, that is family, I wanted to say to them, whatever you do, don't look down. Don't look down, because you're going to start sinking. You're going to get scared to death. Don't think about it too much. Just jump in and start walking. How we learned, right, to swim was jump in and start swimming. That's how most of us learned, I suspect. Somebody threw us in and said, you can do it, and we did it. We got to learn how to trust ourselves too. Trust the water. Trust life, as turbulent as it gets. Trust that this other mortal in my life, this partner now for life, I need to trust him or her with all my might, and trust that if I cry out for help in this relationship and this love gets too scary for me, I have a community around me who can reach out and help pull me up. That I don't have to do this by myself. We don't have to do this by ourselves anymore. I watched them standing there and professing those vows. They should be afraid. And what's more, when it comes to having kids, they should be more afraid. But that's okay, right? Is it a sign that the love is weak, that they're scared? Or is it a sign that they've lived with their eyes wide open? And they know this will probably be the hardest thing they've ever done, and that nothing they've ever done is probably more worth their life. Let the gospel be known and lived. Let the gospel be known and lived. And if fear causes us to want to flee or fight or freeze, let's just make sure we do the next right thing. We must continue to do the good. And we must resist. We must resist anything of evil around us and within us. We must resist. When we stumble across evil or anything in a society that puts people down, that keeps people down, we, the rest of us, must resist. More people than ever in history, they are telling me, not ever in history, but really rather since the 60s in the United States at least, more people than ever are publicly resisting. They say that since the 60s, no amount of people have resisted this much. Our fears, my friends, and this is the truth on any level, wherever the fears are coming from, whatever world they're swirling around in, our fears are an opportunity for moral courage. I don't know if you're aware of it, but each time you come to Mass on Sunday morning, each time you do exactly what we're doing right here, right now, you are joining the resistance. You are assembling with others who are resisting everything that threatens to sink us. There is power in assembling. The power that is in assembling is gathering and being with other people. And our churches, not just ours here, but the churches of this country, our churches are one of the few places and times that assembling still happens in this culture. One of the few places where we still assemble to get our heads on straight and do what we need to do, especially in the light of social media that seems to just create more and more solitudes. We need to assemble, and this can't be something that gets lost in social media. This is a huge part of the transformation of society, what you're doing here right now, your choice to come. How many of you woke up in this morning, took your shower, combed your hair, and said, I'm going to go resist? But you are joining the resistance against evil in this world when you choose to be here like you are this morning. We are here, and we are here together, and we are here to resist evil, and we are here to encourage each other in the face of very real, warranted fears, to keep on and to keep on resisting the evil and to protect the good and act and act and act again. Just do something from here when we are sent back out into the world, to do something for those who are suffering in ways you and I are not suffering. And to lay down the sword of our tongues first, to actively protect the stranger and the widow and anything that threatens this good earth and its abilities to hold us and our children and their children together in beauty. And from here we go out. Hopefully we have our heads on a little straighter. We go out and we see here that we're not alone. And that we see here that we can act no matter how scared we get. That we can feel there's people behind us once we get out from behind those computer screens and assemble. We can write letters. We can take to the streets. We can call out for what would make us our best selves and everybody else. Non-violently, in word and gesture and deed, non-violently, we can do this. It is time to act. It's time to show up at rallies and hearings and speak or write or call. I have a priest friend who regularly calls his congresspeople. When something comes up that warrants his attention and he sees that it flies in the face of the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, he makes the call. And whenever we go out to dinner, which is probably too frequent, he says, Gary, have you called your congresspeople? And I want to say, too busy, I want to say it doesn't have any effect, but the truth is it does. And I've learned from a lot of our students who have become interns in Washington, D.C. and Jefferson City that those tallies happen, and if enough calls come in because they want to get reelected at the very least, they're going to see those tallies, and that call that took me 7 to 10 seconds matters. It really matters. It works. Those calls mount up. Gathering here this morning is a way to keep from sinking. That's what I want to say. Going to Mass, doing what we're doing, is a way to keep from sinking. To remember that we really can get back to those angels of our better nature and rely on each other. After all, we were meant to walk on water.